I'm delighted to welcome our first selectman, former first selectman, longtime former first selectman, Jayme Stevenson, to the Dariien Men's Association. This is just the latest of her many preceding visits, and probably the most exciting one. Last week, for the first time in 10 years, it was not Jayme who delivered the state of the town, but our new chair, Monica McNally. So visiting us this year, Jayme is not bound by what she said last week. A great plus for any politician. Instead, she will talk about her multi-year experience and her personal views on the state of the town. Nobody has a better insight into the town and a better handle on the future of Dariien than Jayme. She's also able to look beyond our small Dariien enclave. She served on a regional level as the chair of the Western Connecticut Council on Government, and on the state level as chair of the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management Agency, that's a long word, and as first vice chair of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. Her financial management background, acquired in her private sector career on Wall Street, eminently qualified her for these regional and state challenges. And raising 5 children seemed to have prepared her well to become such a positive factor in the Dariien school system and to run a tight budget as an executive. Since I have been trying to avoid the tired sentence, this person doesn't need an introduction, may I instead add a fact that nobody in the audience knows. Her husband John told me that over a second beer, I think. Before coming to the Dariien, John and Jayme Stevenson won the New York lottery in an office pool. This turned out to have been an auspicious event, since it is fitting to state when Jayme became first selectman, the town of Dariien won the jackpot. Jayme, I speak for all members of the DMA when I thank you sincerely for tirelessly having looked out for us seniors. Establishing and maintaining the senior center was largely your work. You have at all times taken a deep personal interest in all of your constituents, but it was always obvious that the seniors had a special place in your heart and in your work. And we want to thank you for that.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you so much, Bert. Because we're being recorded today, I'm going to just give you a little more color on that really fabulous New York lottery experience that we had. So my husband worked on Wall Street. He was at First Boston. He was a trader, big trading floor. Many of you have seen them. They have the big phones that light up with all the numbers. And I think it was a Friday. It was a Friday the 13th, which happens to be now my husband's lucky number and lucky day. So they decided they were going to play the lottery. I think it was like a $90 million lottery, which was pretty big back in the day. So they decided that they would pick the first number of numbers that lit up on the phone, which they did. And lo and behold, the 13 people that were in First Boston that went into the pool picked the right numbers. Unfortunately, there were 9 other winning tickets. So the first call I got from my husband, John, was, "We won the lottery." And I was so excited because I was pregnant with my second child. We were looking for a home in Dariien. We had been looking for a year, very expensive as it still is today. So I thought, this is the answer to our prayers. Well, the second phone call came that said, all right, we were one of 9 winning tickets. So when you do the math, don't get too excited about your winnings. But I will say that the little bit of money that we did win in the New York lottery did help us with the down payment on our home on St. Nicholas Road. The house had been on the market for 4 years, which probably tells you the state of affairs with that house. It was a project that we took on willingly and had the joy of, and still do, being neighbors of Bert and Lisa and their family on St. Nicholas. We moved from that house to the other side of the Von Stoop-Nagels a couple years later when we bought a piece of property from Bob Harrell. So it was a joy to be able to move on to St. Nicholas Road, to meet Bob Harrell, to meet my dear, dear friend Terry Wood, who also lives on St. Nicholas Road. And I really credit Bob Harrell with helping me get my start, if you will, in politics. Not really in politics, though. He asked me to join the board at the Dariien Nature Center, which was really a complete pleasure, and worked with some fabulous people, including Lynn Hamlin. And from there, I volunteered along the way with all of the things that my 5 children did as they grew up in Dariien. And by the time 2009 came along, when Jerry Nielsen and Dave Campbell were looking for a teammate, I somehow had acquired a really deep knowledge of our town, a deep understanding of what families needed, what businesses were looking for. And so my good fortune was that Dave and Jerry asked me if I would be their teammate. And the rest is 12 years of history. So with that, thank you so much for that lovely, lovely introduction. I have some prepared remarks today, but I'm most eager to get to your questions, because it's very difficult to sort of encapsulate my 12 years of service, 10 years as your first selectman, into a couple of remarks. So I know you're going to have some great questions for me. And I now have to put these on. Well, maybe I don't. Thank you so much for inviting me here today to reminisce on my time in office with you. Heraclitus said it best: change is the only constant in life. My son, John, youngest of my 5 children, was 10 years old when this chapter of my political life began. And I'm fairly certain that I was a brunette the first time I came to speak to you. Since then, our children have graduated from college. 2 of our daughters have married. My husband and I mourned the passing of all of our parents, and we've experienced the joyful blessings of the birth of 2 beautiful grandchildren. I know your lives have been filled with joys and challenges as well, particularly these last 2 years. The well-being of the town of Dariien was always my highest priority, and I'm deeply grateful to my family for their love and support, and to our town for trusting me to lead that mission. Serving as Darien's first selectman for a decade and helping to shape local, regional, and state policy has been the privilege of a lifetime. Foundational to my leadership are the guiding principles of effective and efficient government. Kind of an oxymoron if you think about it. Fostering an administrative culture of continual improvement, serving our residents and businesses as valued customers, and understanding clearly what role government should and should not play in the lives of individuals, businesses, and families too. Our community is thriving because we've worked together to prioritize public safety, excellence in our schools, financial discipline, environmental stewardship, and thoughtful and inclusive local decision-making. When I joined the Board of Selectmen in 2009 with my teammates Dave Campbell and Jerry Nielsen, our goal was to bring business-minded approach to government services and conservative stewardship of the tax dollars that pay for it. The big issues at the time were to develop a better plan to address the impacts of the 2007 floods without simply moving the problem downstream, and to build a new facility for our senior program, as Bert mentioned. Today, I'm proud to say, very proud to say, that the Mather Center is considered to be one of the most successful senior centers in the state. And Federal Realty, the Palmer family, and the town of Darien have partnered on drainage solutions that preserved Baker Park and surrounding neighborhoods. Flooding impacts from historically damaging storms remains a huge challenge for our community, as we well learned this past July and September. In 2011, voters put their trust and faith in me to lead. Who could have possibly known what the next 10 years, especially the last 2, would bring? Damaging storms too numerous to count, racial and social unrest, an anti-police movement, and a global pandemic of all things. Challenges of this magnitude require calm, focused, collaborative leadership, the ability to unite people in support of one another. The horrific events in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, Hurricanes Irene and Sandy, tropical storms Isaias, Elsa, and Ida, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic, certainly provided ample opportunity for me to hone my emergency management skills. Our willingness to come together in times of great need is the secret sauce of our collective resilience. Successful emergency response and recovery is truly a team effort. I'm very proud of the exceptional town staff and best-in-class police, fire, EMS professionals who are dedicated to the well-being of our community. In the wake of recent anti-police movements, when many towns turned against law enforcement, we doubled down on our unwavering support for the Dariien Police Department. A community cannot survive without a strong bond of trust in those who put their lives on the line every day to protect us. We've done great things together in the past 10 years. We've preserved over 22 acres of open space. We became a sustainable CT community. We've improved our parks and beaches, and maybe we'll get some more pickleball courts as they're coming along. I understand that's great desire. We've managed on time and under budget school and town facility construction projects and prioritized new sidewalks and improved roadway, sewer, and drainage infrastructure. We brought a higher degree of public engagement, accountability, and efficiency to town hall operations. I fostered trusted relationships with our utilities and nonprofit organizations that have proved essential during storms and the pandemic. When necessary, I leveraged these partnerships, but my goal for Dariien was to be self-sufficient and well-prepared for the future. We've always been a desirable community because of our great schools, easy commute, and beautiful Long Island Sound coastline. But today, there's a buzz about Dariien. Developers are choosing to invest significantly in our town with new housing options and exciting new small businesses. This isn't by chance. A well-managed town is foundational to this kind of explosive economic growth. I've learned some important lessons along the way. People want nonpartisan leaders who understand that labels of any kind only serve to divide us. During my tenure, I was elected by my bipartisan peers to a variety of regional and statewide leadership positions. In 2015, I helped to structure the founding of the Western Connecticut Council of Governments and served that organization as both chair and vice chair several times. I chaired the Southwestern Connecticut Metropolitan Planning Organization, served as chairman of the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management Agency. That's the municipal insurance agency, and what a privilege it was to chair that organization. And I retired as first vice president of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, which is the state's largest advocacy group for cities and towns. Each of these beyond Darien border roles gave me a solid platform to advocate for the issues important to Darien residents and businesses. The truest test of leadership is managing in times of crisis. The pandemic is not over yet, but we should be very proud of our success in managing through such an unfamiliar threat. I have great confidence that our team of newly elected leaders will bring comforting COVID-19 management continuity. Beyond the pandemic, the challenges our elected officials facing are very serious. The forces of state and federal government control are growing swiftly and in ways we could not have imagined 10 years ago. The balance of power is, well, it's out of balance. Chaos seems to be our new normal, but I know this is not what Darien residents and Americans in general want. Change will come. Darien voters are smart. Every 2 years, they have the chance to express their support or displeasure with their elected officials. It's been a tremendous honor for me to have earned the trust and support of voters for 6 consecutive elections. I chose not to run in 2021 for one simple reason. I believe in term limits. Elected leaders need to have self-awareness to know when it's time to pass the torch in the interest of new ideas and fresh energy. I believe this to be true for elected representatives at all levels of government. I'm deeply grateful for the honor of serving as Darien's first selectman for a decade. There's always more to do, but I hope we've made a positive difference. My love for our town and our state will play an important role in what comes next for me. For now, my focus is on family and friends and supporting an exciting new Connecticut startup, which I'm really happy to tell you more about in the Q&A. Thank you for inviting me back to reflect on my time serving as your first selectman. I hope I've left our town a little bit better than before you elected me, and that I've provided a calm, steady hand during tumultuous times. I wish you all a healthy and joy-filled holiday season. And now I'd love to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jim will work that side, I'll work this side, and we'll make certain that we pull in people from Zoom as well. So please don't speak unless you have a microphone in your hand.
This is Rick Graffet. So as you leave have left the position, what do you leave on your desk that you would hope to accomplish that is still unfulfilled?
Sure, that's an excellent question. And because I always like pen and paper, I actually made a list. And I left it with First Selectman McNally and the town administrator. As you all are well aware, you know, the wheels of government move very slowly. So it takes a lot of time to get certain things done. I know we have more work to do in terms of drainage and flooding related issues. There are some things that we can do, but honestly, there are some things that we simply can't do. I don't think it's realistic to believe that we can mitigate all that Mother Nature brings our way, especially since, you know, we've all worked very hard to support pretty significant development of the town of Darien. We're actually a very densely developed small town, although we've done it beautifully, I think, over the years. So certainly flooding and drainage are one of those. I tried very, very hard to put a plan together to redevelop the Naroton Heights train station. We actually have a awesome schematic design for a new train station building that would work very well, very synergistically with the Federal Realty Development and the Palmer family development. We got a really cold reception from Connecticut DOT. As you might imagine, the state is constantly looking for new revenue sources. And it's my great belief that the state of Connecticut has circled on the map the Naroton Heights train station for future economic development for the state. So I'm hoping that maybe with the all of the trillions of federal stimulus dollars that have come into the state of Connecticut, that the state might rethink the Naroton Heights train station and let us really bring that amenity up to the 21st century for our commuters. It's really joyful, to be honest, to drive through the train stations and see people going back to work. It was very unusual and quite unsettling to see our commuter parking lots empty for a year and a half. And I've got a lot of other stuff on that list too.
Jayme, what are you going to do now?
You know, that's a great question. I really did pour my heart and soul into the job of being first selectman. It is quite literally a 24/7 job. So I'm taking a bit of personal time to decompress. Have the wonderful joy of inviting my entire family who will be home for Christmas with my 2 grandkids. So taking a little bit of a pause and really being mindful about what my next step might bring. I'm not good at being bored, so there will be something. I will be very honest with you. A number of people have asked me to consider running for higher elected office. I am considering that. It's a big commitment. But in the meantime, I mentioned that I'm working with this really interesting Connecticut startup. So I'm happy to tell you a little bit about it if you're interested. We have three founding members and myself have brought a technology from Japan. This is a little wonky, so bear with me. It's a surface coating, and it's a titanium dioxide based surface coating that is antimicrobial, and it kills all viruses and bacteria on contact. So it's very well timed. The technology does not exist here in the United States yet. We've constructed a factory in North Windham, Connecticut, and we are just pushing our first batches of product out into the marketplace. Schools and hospitals and the hospitality industry are clamoring for the product that we have. So it's a pretty exciting time, and it's interesting and fun for me intellectually to help build a business from the ground up. So I'm interested in staying engaged with that business, at least for the foreseeable short future. Any other questions?
Just one.
Hi, this is Mark on Zoom.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, you mentioned the encroachment of federal and state authorities on local issues. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that, and if you see the likelihood that the state government will succeed in their endeavors to change local zoning and also regionalization of the schools eventually. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that great question. Those are the 2 most significant issues. By and large, staved off during the last legislative session. They're coming back with a vengeance this coming legislative session. I call it state control of local zoning. I know that the zoning advocates don't really like that terminology. But the truth of the matter is that the Biden administration and the Lamont administration believe that we need to aggressively build more affordable housing. And the only way to do that, especially in small towns like ours, where we have little open space for new housing units, is to increase the density. So the original proposal last year that did not successfully move through was to, within a half mile of transit centers, our train stations, and a quarter mile of our commercial districts, Naroton Heights and downtown Dariien, that developers could, as of right, that means without a public hearing and without any ability for neighbors to intervene, that folks could take a single family home and redevelop it into 4 to 8 units of housing. Those proposals are coming back. You might have read recently in the news that New York is doing away with single family zoning. They believe that it's inequitable. Single family zoning is a barrier to equity. So you are going to see that coming back in the next legislative session. And along with that, Representative Rojas has pledged a new push for regionalizing state government, regionalizing in all different ways. Now, what's interesting about regionalization, I mentioned that I chaired the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. That was the state's sort of rebirth of a county style government, if you will, except the councils of governments today don't have taxing power. I literally went kicking and screaming to that COG table because I knew that it was a foreshadowing of things to come. But to my wonderful and positive surprise, it was a place of tremendous bipartisan collaboration. It's probably one of the most significant things that I had the privilege of participating in during my tenure. And we evaluated all kinds of regional services that would be germane to the 18 towns that were in West Cog. Some made financial sense, some did not. So I really think the devil's in the details. You can't say that regionalizing government is this panacea of tax savings. It simply isn't in most cases. And the most dramatic example that I will give you is a couple years ago, they were hoping to regionalize our health departments. The town of Darien spends roughly $300,000 of operating expense to run our small but very mighty local health department. And I know some of you probably benefited from getting your vaccines and your booster shots from the Darien Health Department. They're awesome. Had we regionalized our health departments, the town of Darien's contribution for that would have been $2 million a year. So truly, I'm okay with analyzing the idea of regional service if it makes sense, if the service is as good as or better than what you're receiving now at a better cost. If there's a cost savings in there, by all means. But no one in Hartford has been able to actually show the business case for the success of regionalism. I hope that answered your question, Mark.
Yes, thank you very much.
Hi, thanks so much for
You're welcome.
your great service over the last 10 years or
You're welcome.
12 or whatever. I wonder if you could comment on the state of the various developments going on in town. And I'd heard some scuttlebutt that perhaps the Palmer development had been delayed due to financing, et cetera. But, you know, generally, and also the one over at Selleck's Woods, which has gotten a little publicity lately.
Sure. I'm probably not as up to speed on Selleck's Woods. I think they're still in the deliberation stage of planning and zoning, deciding if that's going to move forward. I personally, I'm a big believer. I call it adaptive reuse. You know, if you have buildings that were one purpose and they are well suited for another, that's a great thing to consider. So it might make good sense for that office building to be turned into housing units. It's great proximity to I-95, hopefully with limited traffic imposition on the rest of the town of Darien. So my personal view is that's a pretty good place for more housing choice in Darien. Corbin, as you see, you know, big hole in the ground, that's full speed ahead. Gosh, David and his family and his partners have been aggregating properties and working on this for 15 years. So it's wonderful to see that project coming to fruition. And I really want to give a shout out to David Genovese and his family because it's remarkable the care that he's taken with his tenants. He not only during COVID did he take good care of his tenants and understand the financial pressures they were under, but he moves his tenants from place to place to keep them in business while he's doing his development. And I know very few developers that really care in that kind of a way. Federal Realty, have you driven by that recently? Wow. I think it's going to be beautiful. For me, I had always hoped that the other properties on Heights Road could somehow be integrated into that development. I still will remain hopeful that could be the case because the massing difference between the new development and the existing businesses is a bit odd. And Ed Gentile, our public works director, and myself, we had a grand vision of what Naroton Heights would look like, with Edgerton being kind of the entry point into this beautiful redeveloped business center and train station redevelopment. And my biggest wish was that we could have built a roundabout at the intersection of Heights Road and Edgerton to move traffic along more smoothly. So maybe Ed will help carry that forward. The Palmer development is moving forward. I believe that they have successfully brought on board a new partner. I think they got derailed with some of the implications of COVID. with some of the people that were maybe going to finance their project. So very difficult time for any developer to put their cards on the table when, you know, business was literally at a standstill and you've committed all of these millions of dollars to redevelopment. But it's all moving forward, and boy, is our town going to be an interesting place in about 3 years. Very, very exciting. You're welcome. Anyone else?
Speaking of Federal Realty, it seems like there are going to be quite a few apartments.
Yes.
How does that fit in with the state's idea of low-cost housing and dense housing?
Well, it should fit in very well. And we've tried to make that case to the state of Connecticut to come down, to take a look, to see what's happening. The hundreds of housing units between the Federal Realty project and the Palmer's project that will be added, you know, new housing options for people to live in immediate proximity to the train stations is what the state of Connecticut wants. They call it transit-oriented development. The good news is that all of our commercial areas are transit-oriented in one way or another. However, I think the state still sees that they have an opportunity to monetize the property that they own, which are the commuter parking lots around the Naroton Heights train station, and also the parking lots around the Dariien train station, with the exception of the Coons lot and the small lot that's called Leroy West, which is owned by the town of Dariien. So, you know, it all stems back to the fact that the state of Connecticut, for years, for as many years as I've been serving, has been in fiscal disarray. I think things are changing. The bipartisan budget that was approved in 2017 helped to boost the finances and fill up the rainy day fund for the state of Connecticut. And as I said, there's been just huge sums of stimulus money that's flowing into the state. But we still have a state employee and teacher pension crisis that is enormous, and an expansion in general of government services. So somebody's got to pay that bill, and they're looking for ways to do it. And they've been charged with finding state-owned property throughout the state of Connecticut that they can monetize through development.
Do I have anybody on Zoom who wants to ask a question?
I have a question, Jayme.
Yes, Bert.
We haven't talked about the school system.
Okay.
That's 2/3 of the budget. Can you tell us what you expect to happen with our schools going forward? How are we going to handle that financially? It's always going to be an issue for the budget. Thank you.
It's always going to be an issue because everybody in the town of Darien highly values high quality public education. And we are willing to set that above often other things that need to be done. I can tell you that there were many things that we wish that we could have maybe done or done faster on the town side of the budget, but we knew that we had to be really financially disciplined because the residents of Darien want to make sure that we're giving the school districts all the things that they need and that they want. So I don't see that changing. The problem that we have, I think the problem that most governments have, is that our budgets are largely driven by contractual obligations. It's impossible to keep you know, a zero budget, a flat budget, when you have commodity contracts and union contracts with 2.5% wage increases over the term of the contract, unless you're cutting away certain other things. So we did that. We did that at the beginning of COVID. I worked with the Board of Finance and said, this is a year when the Board of Selectmen has to come in with a zero budget. We just simply have to do that. People are hurting and we need to be responsive. But I think we're always going to have that problem. There will be a point in time when people can no longer absorb those kinds of increases. I think it's the single greatest problem with affordability that we have are our local property taxes and the constant, 2, 3, 4% increases.
Okay, Rolf on Zoom.
Hello, Rolf.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Good to see you, Jayme.
You too.
You made reference earlier about priority as you were leaving office with the drainage for the town. And I know that there's been some areas of town that have been identified as choke points. One that I think really came to light during the storm in September was the Goodwives River, particularly as it flows through the culvert under the railroad. And so my question is, that's a Department of Transportation issue, as I understand it. And so how can we as a town try and gain their attention about these problems to try and help address them so that they don't cause problems in the future?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. After that September storm, which, by the way, I don't know if you saw the data on those two storms that we had, July and September. They were between a 200-year and a 500-year storm. Transportation, railroad, and drainage infrastructure is rarely built to a standard higher than a 100-year storm. So right there, you have an inherent problem with the infrastructure that we have. On top of that, our infrastructure under the railroads and under I-95, and there are a number of choke points all along both of those transit corridors, are very old. They're 50 to 100 years old. So certainly not keeping pace with the changes that we have in storm activity. After the September storm, when Tokenique Road buckled, Monica McNally and I went out and spoke to the folks from ConDOT that were out assessing that roadway, and I think they're still working on it. And their answer to us that day was, well, the culvert's really not that old, so we have no plans to replace it. So, my great hope is that our town leaders are going to continue to press that issue. But I do want to say that it's not as simple as just putting in a bigger culvert. That's a great place to look at the problem, though. If anybody shops at Fisherman's Net or goes to Butler's Laundromat, I recommend that you do. They're awesome people. Their businesses were devastated in those floods, and they could really use your business. But if you go behind Fisherman's Net, you have a clear view of the railroad culvert, which is generously sized, and then the culvert that goes under Tokenique Road, which is undersized. So it's a big choke point. But if you simply make the culverts bigger, you're moving the problem downstream. And then what happens to the homes and businesses? So it requires a really sophisticated hydrological analysis to understand how the fix will impact the rest of the watershed before it gets to the Long Island Sound. So not easy, super complicated, but I know that our town leaders are dedicated to doing what they can, what is feasible, what is reasonable to do to mitigate future flooding.
Steve Ligori on Zoom.
Hi, Steve.
Yeah, hi, Jayme. First, thank you for your service. Really, it was really wonderful having you as our first select person for all these past years. My question is about the future. I know it's exciting being involved in a startup. In my post corporate life, I coach a lot of startups myself, so it's great to be involved in any way. But what consideration and when are you going to think about from a future standpoint? When might you get reengaged in politics, and potentially at what level? Given the way the margins you were reelected with every year, you'd certainly would get a ton of local support, and I suspect a much broader level of support.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to take the holidays to really ruminate on some thoughts that people have had for how I could be helpful in the government sector. There's a couple areas I'm going to be a little bit cagey on answering that question, because A, I'm not ready to commit to it at this point in time, and B, certainly not ready to make any kind of a campaign announcement.
Got it.
But the truth of the matter is I've gained a lot of knowledge. The one thing that I really have loved about being first selectman is I had to learn, wanted to learn new things every single day. And I think that something that I bring to the table is compassionate leadership. I really try to deeply understand how people are affected by the decisions that government makes. And so that will be top of mind for me as I move forward. And certainly my Dariien community would be the first to know of any decisions that I make
Great.
about future in politics. Thank you for
Super.
asking.
Yeah, thanks for the response.
Hello.
Are you calling on me, Brian?
Yes, I am indeed.
Hi, Gary.
Okay, I didn't hear you. Hi, Jayme. Hey, just on flooding, there's a terrific thing, and I know you were there, on September 20th. It's available on TV 79, where the engineering experts just really talked about, and you said this is not simple. So anybody thinks they have a simple answer, they don't know what they're talking about. And by the way, we have Craig Flaherty coming later on in the spring to talk to us about flooding. So it's a complicated and important subject. So I do that. But actually, my question is, I've heard hints of some sort of disrespect and intolerance in the schools, and I no longer have kids in the schools, so I'm out of touch. You certainly don't want to get that started. And what are some ideas how we as a community can constructively support our schools and our teachers?
Absolutely. I don't see that as simply a school issue. That's a whole of community issue. And it's not anything new. This is, for all the years that I've been serving as your first selectman, there have been from time to time expressions of intolerance, most particularly against the Jewish community. Kids, it's predominantly kids, I believe, drawing pictures of swastikas in various places, which I know is very hurtful to anyone who is Jewish in our community. I don't want to get myself into trouble on this issue because I know the school's working very hard. They're having very serious conversations right now. They will be rolling out an audit and some work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like most organizations, most governments, most private sector businesses are doing the same thing. But I think what I really want to say is this. It's not a rampant problem in our town. We all want our town. Our town should be open, welcoming, inclusive. I was thrilled this year that we were finally able to get holiday expressions that include the Jewish community in holiday celebrations. That's awesome. But sometimes kids do things that are just what kids do, dumb things. They do things without thinking. That ends up creating a really big issue within our community. And so I encourage people to be cautious in casting blame. Sometimes these kids are crying out for help for other reasons. And I'm really very mindful of the mental health situation of our kids right now, particularly in the face of everything that they've gone through with COVID. So I simply ask that our town doesn't overreact, but acts thoughtfully and in measured ways that actually make a positive difference and don't ostracize others along the way.
That's a good point on which to end. Thanks a lot, Jayme.
You're so
Thanks for your
welcome. Thank
speech.
you so much for having me.
Thank
And
you. Thank you for coming.
I just want to leave you with one other thought. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with so many of you in various volunteer capacities throughout the years. This is an amazing group of people. And I want to thank you all. You know, my 10 years pales in comparison to the aggregate volunteer time of all of you in this room and some people who are no longer in this room. So I want to thank you very much for that and really appreciate the chance to come here and debrief with you today. Thank you.
Thank you again.